boy, do I have a treat for you today. So you are an HR professional, a business owner, or if you manage people at a company, you are definitely going to want to hear what this lovely lady has to say. Dr. Dawn D. Bennett-Alexander.
Which does not mean badass.
I think it does. She is a tenured associate professor of legal studies at the University of Georgia, Terry College of Business, which is where we are filming this, and the founder of Practical Diversity, which is a consulting business. She is a cum laude graduate at the Howard University School of Law and magna cum laude graduate at the University of the District of Columbia. Now, she worked in legal capacities in Washington, D.C. at the Federal Labor Relations Authority, litigating federal sector labor law cases, the White House, Domestic Council, the D.C. Court of Appeals, and at the Federal Trade Commission's Antitrust Division, the U.S. Department of Justice. Dr. B.A. publishes extensively in the employment law area with particular emphasis on issues of race, gender, sexual harassment, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Now, she published a first of its kind employment law textbook, Employment Law for Business, which created the employment law discipline for colleges of businesses. Now, is there anything you want to share?
You know what? What I would share is that the D.C. Court of Appeals is D.C.'s highest court.
Wow.
And what I think is most significant about that is that I was the first law clerk to the first black female who was appointed to that court, which was the first black female to be appointed to a court of last jurisdiction in the country.
Wow.
Yeah.
Didn't I tell y'all she was impressive?
No, if you mention diversity at University of Georgia, you need to talk to Dawn because she's going to give you some background and stuff about it.
I think that was the thing that was so exciting for me in Practical Diversity, which with my audience, your stance around practical diversity, because the way that you explain it is different than I've heard it, and I've been in the game. I'm not telling y'all how long, but I've been doing D&I and labor and employment things for a long time, and it's rare that I find someone that has that understanding about the business aspect of it and is able to talk about it from that perspective.
Yeah.
So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think probably the legal background is a big piece of that because, and actually the way I came into it is a big piece of it because when I came in, the only guidance I had was the person who was teaching labor law just sort of growled at me, "Don't touch labor law." And it was like, okay, so now I know what it's not, so let me figure out what it is. And what I realized was that we really were talking about Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. But think about it, this was 1987. Nobody was really dealing with that. The law had been passed in 64. And nobody, I mean, I'm talking to a group of labor lawyers who have no clue what this is, and I have to figure it out myself, what it is, and you know, what's important to teach. And I was teaching at the time, the course was a graduate course in the MBA. So my students were working during the day in businesses, and at night they would come and take this class. It just sort of struck me that they had no clue what this was that they were learning when they were people, these are not undergraduates, these are MBAs who have jobs every day dealing with these issues. I think that in large part sort of shaped my approach to it because I realized that I couldn't assume that they knew certain things. And I also had to deal with who they were and how that fit into this equation. And because I'm a lawyer, because I deal through cases, the looking at the cases meant, especially if I was talking to somebody who was in management, what can I what can we figure out about this case that makes it so you will not end up as one of these cases?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because it's like, we don't want this to happen.
Right.
So how can we keep this from happening? And as we talked about it, and this, I have to tell you, I believe the universe sends you what you need.
I agree.
Even when you don't even necessarily see it.
I agree.
So that first, I had been a lawyer, okay? I mean, I was used to working 12 months a year. When I got to academia, I realized it is a 9-month appointment. So in the summers, you don't get paid. And I don't think I realized that until maybe February or March. And it was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I started asking people, like, what do you do in the summertime for your money? Well, as it turns out, they knew to save because they were used to being in academia.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't know that. And I had children, and I needed some money in the summer. So I said, well, what can I do? And somebody said, well, why don't you go to continuing ed? I'm like, what is continuing ed? Well, as it turns out, the university would put on programs for the community or for the region
Mm-hmm.
That people would come to, and they would handle it for you. You just walk in and start teaching. And I'm like, okay, I'll go there, but I don't know what I can do. So I go there, and they're like, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I teach, employment law. And they said, well, sort of come up with a brochure or something, because they didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to, totally think about this a different way, right? Like, what would somebody who I want to come to this think
Right.
they needed this for?
Right.
So I think my first one started off with something like, don't make the $68,000 mistake or something,
Mm-hmm.
which was a case that had just come out. And what that was sort of good for was when people showed up, which they did, and it became one of their most popular programs.
Wow.
They wanted to run it all the time. But they came with these questions that they would have. And when I would say, why did you do whatever it was they told me they did, when I asked how they handled it, they would tell me. And I began to realize that a whole lot of them was in this thing that I was thinking of as something legal. Okay?
Ah.
So like now, school started week before last, and the first day of class, I'd say to the students, tell me what's illegal to do in a workplace in terms of hiring people. And I listed on the board, and they say, oh, race and gender and stuff like that. And I say, then why are we here? You're absolutely right about most of it. But why are we here? If you already know that walking in the door, why are we here? And I get that because of those early times when people came in,
Mm-hmm.
and remember, they didn't even really know what Title VII was. And in fact, one time I started a lecture, and I was, we were dealing with this stuff, and finally somebody raised their hand, and they were like, what is Title VII? And I said, the Civil Rights Act. What is that? And these are people who are working every day as managers or HR people. So I realized I had to sort of start back.
Mm-hmm.
There were these assumptions I was making that I could not make.
Mm-hmm.
And a part of that was the law, okay, sort of catching them up on the law. And another part was what you bring to that equation. So if you know that this is illegal to do, why are claims at an all-time high?
Exactly.
And I realized that one of the reasons was because what we weren't dealing with, which became my whole approach, was that we weren't dealing with how those decisions got made about those issues of discrimination.
Ah.
And that's why I say practical diversity, because the theory part is nice,
Right.
but the truth is, what do you do?
Yeah, what do you do?
Yeah.
What happens in the workplace? What are
And
you actually doing?
The theory's nice, but we want you to act it. And part of acting it is understanding what you're bringing to the table that creates the decisions that you make about these issues in the first place. So for instance, if you're a guy who loves catcalling, then, and some woman at work tells you that, somebody was catcalling her, you're not going to interpret that as a problem. It's like, what's the problem with catcalling people? I mean, it's a compliment, right? Or like the guy, this woman was in a session, and she, and it was not an adverse situation. It was just because they wanted to be proactive, and she sort of teared up as she told me about finding this right pair of shoes that she wanted to wear, and they were red, the exact color red she needed for this dress she had. And she walks in, and her boss says to me, "Oh, I see you have your Fuck Me Pumps on today." And am I not supposed to say that?
Oh no, you're fine. You are fine. This goes on YouTube.
Sorry. But you know what? That's actually a decision I've always had to make, because the truth is, I want you to hear the reality of it, because I want you to understand how it impacts people and why they would feel impacted by that. So she's just thinking she's looking nice.
Right.
And he's thinking he's giving her the greatest compliment, and he has just totally knocked her out.
Right.
She went to the bathroom and cried. She then came back and was trying to think of how to deal with it with him, and then he later said it during the day. Well, by that time, it wasn't a shock the way it was the first time.
Right.
So what she did was she took him aside and said, "You probably think you just gave me a real big compliment, but let me tell you how it was for me." And that was such a perfect example of what practical diversity is like, because if you start screaming and yelling at him about, this is totally inappropriate behavior because, it violates the law, that's not dealing with the reality that's in his head.
And that's not going to help him for the next time.
Which is, been at this long enough to know, what we realize is we are all learning here.
Yes.
Okay, because the rules have changed.
Yes.
And that's why it's important to understand, where I came into the picture. Even the lawyers didn't know what this was. The labor people didn't know what this was. So we've all sort of been in this position of having to learn, and at the same time change society and be chastised in that process. Approach I use is not, it seems, it's a lot of fun. I really just enjoy being with people so much, and they give, once you create that space that allows them to feel like they
open
can
up.
explore, they do.
They open up.
And they have so much to give.
And then they learn.
That's when the learning takes place.
Because that's when the learning takes place.
Yeah.
That is so true.
And they don't have to feel like they are less than.
Right.
They don't have to feel like they're castigated for it. We are all works in progress.
Yes.
We are all, because we do come with all sorts of things that we use as the basis for those decisions that we make. Finding out how those decisions get made becomes an important piece. And then you do the work of adjusting.
Right.
And the people who decided it was worth dealing with started to do things like offer seminars and training. The approach was a sort of in-your-face, I'm going to say you're a racist, I'm going to say you're a sexist kind of
and
thing.
That just
and
doesn't
now.
Yeah, that doesn't work. And it doesn't change anything.
It doesn't. In
'Cause
fact, it
does
does change something. What it does is it makes you feel more dug in and more pissed off.
Right.
And the opportunity for learning that
is
you would
gone.
ordinarily get, which is what you want,
Right.
because the whole point of learning is that you are going to be able to do better next time. Well, if you accuse people, if you walk in with that kind of approach, first of all, I can't imagine you're going to have a whole lot of folks that are going to keep talking to you.
Right.
But what you end up doing is shutting people down,
Yeah.
which is exactly the opposite of what
Exactly.
you want. For me, doing the public speaking, whether I'm training or doing presentations or workshops, you know what? If it's not fun, I don't want to do it.
Well, that sounds like my line.
That's why we resonate with each other, girlfriend. I'm telling you, because I know it can be that
It can
way.
be fun.
It doesn't have to be this painful, awful thing. And I think part of that is because of the way you feel about how people are in general. And I tend to think that most people want to do the right thing. Now, whether they know what the right thing to do is a different story. Doing the training and using what people come there with, and them getting to have those light bulb moments for themselves, rather than because I told you you were racist or sexist or whatever, ends up not only resonating with them long past the time that we're together, but it also teaches them in a way that the sort of that radicalized approach did not do.